In an open area far away from the city, an orphanage was built, where a few young students were practicing swordsmanship. Eventually, Tatsu emerged as the winner and was awarded the title of captain. The other students remarked that Tatsu was indeed very strong, and as the captain, he was presented with a sword, a mantle, and a hat. Tatsu wore the mantle and hat and wondered how he looked in the captain's attire. The students appreciated and complimented him, saying that he looked good and even addressed him as captain. Suddenly, Durant arrived, visibly angry, and scolded them all for playing with his swords, reminding them that he had told them many times not to do so. The students seemed frightened by his anger. Durant then shouted at Tatsu, ordering him not to take his belongings from the storage again and to return everything immediately. However, Tatsu refused, insisting that the items were his now since he had been chosen as captain. Afterward, Tatsu gathered all the students for class and told them it was time to study science and social studies. Without further delay, he began the lesson by explaining that 10 years ago, the city's means of transport relied mostly on coal or steam as fuel. One student asked about horse carts, to which Durant responded that many still existed in some areas. Instead of those, he asked what the main form of energy in their world was. Tatsu answered that it was electricity. Durant then asked what produced electricity, and Tatsu said it was water mills and cows. Durant denied this, explaining that electricity was generated by something more powerful, thunder cores. He described thunder cores as fuel extracted from fossils deep underground, producing energy far superior to coal or steam. Thanks to this energy, large quantities of cargo could be transported, factories could manufacture many goods, and civilization had advanced significantly. Innovations such as streetlights, cars, trains, and airships had become possible because of this. Durant then checked the time and asked the students to look out the window. They saw a gigantic airship that excited them greatly. Durant explained that it was the Excalibur, a large private passenger and cargo airship about to land at the city's airfield. He further explained that advancements in thunder core technology had led to the invention of coal engines that flew using magnetism, allowing huge vessels that propellers could never carry to soar through the skies. Seeing the students still staring outside, Durant asked if they were even listening to him. Durant continued by explaining that airships were symbols of their electrical civilization and said that they would now study how airships worked. He told the students to begin by using a large sheet of paper to draw an airship with its control cabin and engine. The students seemed excited. Tatsu suggested starting with the huge cockpit, while another student proposed including the engine, a drill, and even the cannon and machine gun. A girl interrupted, wondering why only boys were interested in such things, and suggested there should be a fancy restaurant as well. Durant responded that this was not what he meant and reminded them that they were having a class, not a fun activity. He then noticed that Mano was not getting along with the other kids yet. Approaching Mano, Durant told him that it had been 4 days since he arrived, but he had not talked to anyone, even though all the other kids were good. Mano replied that he did not care about them. Tatsu was displeased and called Mano a dumb boy, asking him what he had said. The students began brainstorming about the ship that would one day take them all over the world, and they told Mano that he should contribute ideas since he was not there for free. Other students gathered around Mano, encouraging him to speak and not space out. Finally, Mano suggested including a bathroom and a toilet. When one boy questioned this, Mano felt as if he had made a mistake and apologized. However, Tatsu appreciated Mano's suggestion, joking that they might otherwise have to hold it in and never bathe during the entire trip. As they continued adding features such as a cinema and many other things, Mano simply stood quietly. Durant praised Tatsu for being the captain of everyone. Tatsu then suggested asking Professor Durant to choose a name for the ship and that it should be a cool one. Durant thought about a name for the ghost ship, but a boy objected, saying it was not a ghost ship. Eventually, Durant proposed the name Sprite. The students agreed that the name was very cool, and they finished making their model of the airship Sprite. Tatsu remarked that if they flew with the Sprite, they would be able to go wherever they wanted freely. Although they could not land because they might spread illness, they could see the whole world from the sky. The iron-like object on their hands was a mark of the illness. A girl asked when the illness would heal, and Tatsu explained that with the airship, they could even travel to the flying island Magonia. Mano mentioned that Magonia existed only in fairy tales. Then Durant told the students to begin that day's lesson. Suddenly, a boy pointed outside, noting that many airships were floating nearby. Realizing this, Durant instructed everyone to get down. Suddenly, a blast struck their building. A few people emerged from one of the airships armed with guns, ready to attack them. A man also appeared and asked how they were and if they remembered him. He remarked that the airships had grown very large, but that was fine because he had civilization beds of similar size. Durant called the man Colonel Shepard and asked how he had found them. Colonel Shepard told him to shut up and said that the fairies had led him there. Upon seeing Mano, the colonel asked if it was really him. Mono, frightened, insisted he had done nothing wrong. Colonel Shepard revealed that Mono's electromagnetic waves were much stronger than anyone else's and were strong enough to reach the Army's radar from that god-forsaken place. He explained that he had come there because of Mono. Mono felt very bad about this. Colonel Shepard continued, stating that the Thunder Corps humans had thought they could hide there, but Durant had underestimated their power. Tatsu wondered about the Thunder Corps humans, and Colonel Shepard asked them to forgive him for allowing them to live like normal people until now. He declared that he was going to capture Mono and bring him back to his proper form. Tatsu immediately jumped to attack the colonel with his sword, demanding that he leave his friend alone. Otherwise, the colonel would have to fight the captain. The colonel agreed and said they would start with Tatsu. Then he attacked Tatsu using spikes on his fingers. At that moment, Durant intervened, pushing Tatsu to take the attack himself. Tatsu was stabbed, which shocked him deeply. The colonel questioned the meaning of Durant's actions and wondered if Durant was truly attached to the students. He then threatened to give Durant a painful death in front of them all. Using a shockwave, the colonel said he would compress Durant's heart until it was crushed. Durant screamed in immense pain. Tatsu pleaded with the colonel to stop, fearing that Durant might die. The pressure on Durant's heart increased until, after a while, he spat out blood and collapsed. Tatsu was devastated and began crying, calling out Professor Durant's name. The colonel ordered his men to recover all specimens and to leave no one behind. His men proceeded to capture the students while Tatsu continued calling out for Durant. As the colonel turned to leave, Durant suddenly woke, slashed the colonel's back with a sword, and grabbed Tatsu. Together, they began running away. Though in pain, the colonel commanded his men not to let them escape and ordered them to chase after the pair. Durant put Tatsu into a car and apologized, saying that he had only been able to save Tatsu for now. He started the car and drove away into the forest while airships fired upon them. Tatsu was worried because Durant's heart was still crackling. Durant reassured him, explaining that he was treating it himself, using a method like defibrillation on his crushed heart by applying an electrical massage. He said there was something important he needed to tell Tatsu while he still could. They stopped the car in a secluded place, and Durant told Tatsu they should stay there since the hospital was in the opposite direction. Tatsu realized they were not heading to a hospital. Otherwise, their pursuers would have already caught them. Curious, Tatsu asked why those people were chasing them so relentlessly. Durant revealed that the pursuers wanted to capture all the children, including Tatsu himself. Suddenly, Durant noticed the pursuers were nearby and urged Tatsu to hide immediately. As the attackers approached, they closed off all escape routes. A puck came to attack and defend them, but soon after, an airship arrived. Tatsu understood that their enemies were willing to fight even inside the city. In response, Tatsu grabbed a gun and fired at the airship, managing to blast it off. He watched all this while hiding and realized how amazing Durant truly was. Durant then called him over, saying he needed to show him something, even if it might be painful. When Tatsu approached, Durant asked if he remembered their previous conversation about Thunder Corps. Tatsu questioned why Durant wanted to bring it up now. Durant explained that Thunder Corps had granted great power to humanity, enabling the development of cities and shaping the world as it was now. However, he warned that this resource also had a terrifying side that was kept secret from the public. Durant explained that Thunder Corps were found in fossils that were incredibly ancient and had rested underground for tens of thousands of years. Over time, their energy began to diminish, but they were still sufficient to provide power to cities. However, the military had been constantly searching for a way to extract the original, full energy from the Thunder Corps. Durant then showed Tatsu the result of these experiments, which shocked him deeply. A shriveled human body connected to numerous wires. Durant explained that this was a human who had been injected with a living Thunder Core and implanted with electrodes in their hand to draw electricity. This was the true Thunder Core human. Durant said he was unsure how it worked, but this method had multiplied the energy output by thousands. In fact, just 2 or 3 of these particularly powerful individuals could move an entire battleship. Tatsu looked at his own hand in shock, noticing the electrodes embedded there. Durant told him that it was an illness causing iron to grow inside their bodies. He revealed that Colonel Shepard had carried out human experiments to create higher performance Thunder Core humans. Using injections too powerful for ordinary people, the Colonel had conditioned specially chosen children from infancy. As a result, 7 children were created, who possessed incredible power within their bodies. Hearing this, Tatsu began to cry and apologized. Durant comforted him with a hug, acknowledging it was a horrible story, but insisted he had to tell Tatsu the truth now. Durant explained that they had come to the city so Tatsu could escape underground, preventing the pursuers from tracking him by detecting the magnetic waves emitted by the Thunder Core humans' bodies. Going underground would keep Tatsu safer. Tatsu then asked what would happen to the others who had been kidnapped. Durant revealed that those children would be turned into mummies within about 10 years. That was why, at the very least, Tatsu needed to be free of them. Shouting fiercely, Tatsu declared that freedom meant nothing to him if it meant leaving his friends behind. He wanted to play with them, ride the airship, and travel the world together. He didn't care if he had to fight the army. He was determined to save his friends no matter what. Durant started laughing, saying that it was exactly the same thing. He apologized for laughing and asked Tatsu to listen carefully. He explained that Tatsu had a high-speed conductive core blood inside him, and that the thunder core boosted the electric current speed to an extremely high level. This core was one of those that exceeded the limits of physical phenomena. Durant then took Tatsu's hands and told him that if the river spinning in a watermill doubled its speed, it would become very powerful, but it would still need to be controlled to be used effectively in fighting. He was certain that the bright red lightning would become Tatsu's strength, though it would be rough, and Tatsu would have to endure it. Suddenly, Tatsu felt a surge of power mixed with pain. Durant apologized, saying that it was the only way. He then released all the electricity stored within him and awakened Tatsu's core. Tatsu did not understand what was happening and felt as if he was no different from everyone else, like a slave. It was extremely hard and painful, filled only with despair. Durant reflected that despite how foolish it seemed, what they had done was to save them. Durant was now happy because he felt saved himself, and that was why he had decided to save those children. Tatsu still did not understand the situation. Durant urged him to do his best, to become strong, and then fell down, asking Tatsu to save everyone. He even called Tatsu captain. Tatsu began crying as electric waves emitted from him. Afterward, Tatsu left the place. 6 years passed. In the military arsenal town of the Edenia capital city, an announcement was made celebrating the forthcoming day of magnificent triumph in the Great War, honoring the glory of Edenia, the one country of justice. Everyone was very happy. A boy told his mother about a giant ship ahead of them and how many people were tied up to be used as an electric power source. Dr. Randolph approached the colonel, saying he hadn't heard that the Scurver was a private vessel and that it would exceed its specifications. He questioned the colonel, asking how many people he was willing to kill if he intended to sustain the ship with human electric power. The colonel replied that although he loathed seeing all those civilians treated like rats, wasn't it inevitable? Randolph revealed that there was no fuel left for the parade the next day. The colonel felt disappointed, saying that if they had the child Randolph had spoken of, they wouldn't need so many people. He added that their filthy power cells had the chance to exchange their pathetic lives and blood for prestigious energy until they were completely drained. Suddenly, someone appeared and broke the ropes supporting the platform where the colonel and Dr. Randolph stood, causing the ship to fall. The colonel was surprised and asked if the platform had collapsed and what had just happened. It was Tatsu who appeared with a sword, explaining that he had trained his body for 6 years to access such power and learn how to fight. He said that he had been waiting and sharpening his skills for the day when the colonel and that ship would appear together in the city. He introduced himself as the captain of Durant's disciples from the abandoned cathedral, the Red Lightning Tatsu, and told the colonel to prepare himself. The colonel was delighted that Tatsu had finally returned and said he would now free Tatsu from everything and crush their enemies. His people began firing at Tatsu, but none of the bullets touched him, which shocked the colonel. Tatsu then swiftly attacked and killed all of them in an instant. The colonel was stunned, wondering how Tatsu had done it. It seemed that the high-speed current within Tatsu was running through his nerves, burning them, and that was how Tatsu had achieved such high-speed reflexes in just 6 years. The colonel could not understand what Tatsu had done to his body in that time. He attacked Tatsu, demanding that he show more. Tatsu agreed and struck the colonel, finally stabbing his sword into his chest. He said it would be better if they talked less and directly asked where his friends were. The colonel smiled and told Tatsu that this was his reward for his splendid growth. He claimed to know only one of Tatsu's friends, as others had taken the rest from him. However, Tatsu realized he could easily find that child because there was a triumph parade the next day, the star of which was the Great Altus, a giant ground warship, and Mono was inside its engine room. Tatsu simply took out his sword, and the colonel asked if he was not going to avenge Durant's death. Tatsu replied that he had already done so. Suddenly, the colonel felt as if his heart was being crushed. Tatsu left, telling him to have the brain of a crushed heart. Meanwhile, the others watched, wondering if Tatsu would take on all the soldiers by himself and questioning who he really was. Tatsu addressed them as brothers and sisters, giving them a choice. They could either stay there as they had been, spending their lives in that shed until they died, or they could come with him to stand against the inhumanity and embark on a journey toward freedom. The people were confused and wondered what he was talking about, believing there was no way to escape. Tatsu pointed out a very large ark soaring in the skies. Some began to understand, while others wondered if he had gone insane and questioned who he really was. Tatsu was glad they asked and revealed that he was the leader of all the Thunder Corps humans, the one and only Captain Tatsu. That night, the scene shifted to a road where people were talking about noises coming from the army base. A boy pointed to a huge, bright red ship flying in the sky. It was the ship managed by Tatsu. As Tatsu released his power to run the ship, others wondered if he was truly crazy to produce such an immense amount of activation energy all by himself. They heard that they were reaching a stabilized elevation. Tatsu then stopped and left the controls to them, explaining that if 20 people rotated shifts continuously, they would be able to maintain the current output level of the nuclear core reactor. He asked if anyone had experience as a helmsman, and reassured them that if no one did, it was not a problem because he would steer the ship himself. A boy asked if Tatsu had actually steered a ship before. Tatsu replied that it was more like bracing for impact. A girl told Tatsu to stop playing around and said she would take over, as she had some experience from a few places. Tatsu agreed that it was perfect, mentioning that he knew a slave from the base would have experience with such things. Others agreed that it was a good idea to follow Tatsu's lead. Otherwise, they would die if they stayed behind. Tatsu then put on the formal uniform of a captain and said they would need that gear for their next plan. After some time, people brought Dr. Randolph forward. He asked them to wait, saying he was not a soldier. But the others reminded him that Randolph was one of the scientists experimenting on humans. They questioned whether they should knock him down to the ground. Randolph asked if they had any idea what they were doing. He explained that the capital was currently in the middle of the Trump Parade, a major event where Edenia's leaders gathered. The army had established a large-scale security network patrolling the airspace, making it impossible to hijack a warship and escape from the world's strongest armed forces. The people said that if that was the case, then escape was impossible. Tatsu, dressed in his captain's uniform, wondered aloud who had suggested escaping at all. He asked why they thought he had picked the warship, revealing that he simply happened to know about the valuable cargo loaded on it. Then Tatsu put on his badge and told everyone that there was no plan to retreat now. He explained that their ability to keep the ship afloat was insufficient, and if they abandoned it to flee on the surface, the radar would track them down. Everyone was shocked, wondering if they were going to die a flashy death in the sky. They marked the triumphant commemoration of Edenia, which was actually an assault on the military parade. Large armaments were marching on the ground, and in plain sight of the world, they planned to rescue their compatriots. Meanwhile, Mono felt deeply sorry for being unable to do anything as he was stuck in the engine room. At the parade, the knights stood near the television, explaining that the orders would come through radios and television. Their general, Atlas, was scheduled to give a speech, and it was the citizens' duty to witness it as it would be broadcast widely. The supreme leader of Edenia, David Atlas, gave his speech, addressing the people as the bright future of their country. He revealed that the world had been saved, despite chaos and depravity having infiltrated it, and despite many corrupted societies existing. He said that the Great War had opened a new chapter through the correct conquest, but corrupt cities that denied justice still remained. To exterminate these, they would tirelessly sharpen their military and expand the territory of justice. When he finished, the anchor on the broadcast said the speech was magnificent. Atlas's passionate words had moved the entire parade with much cheering from the military personnel. The anchor added that viewer ratings had reached 99%, showing the citizens' strong approval of Atlas. As a result, their territory of justice had also received second-class citizen gratitude because of the speech. The broadcasting tower was operating smoothly, and the electric field regulatory levels showed no issues, indicating that everything was going well. The only regret was that the skies were not agreeable. Randolph asked Tatsu if they were really going to go through with their plan and questioned whether they knew the machine wasn't built for such use. Meanwhile, a lady reporter announced that soon, before His Excellency, the Great Atlas would make his passage. Tatsu wondered if Randolph intended to stop him, but he thought it was time to unleash the true rain of fire. The reporter continued, describing Atlas as a noble figure and the glorious symbol of Edenia. Atlas himself stated that whatever the situation was, it was not his problem, and that he only sought the good and prayed God would bless the citizens with eternal glory. Before he could continue, a heavy attack was launched, shocking everyone. It was Tatsu who arrived with his sword, asking General Atlas how he was doing. People were terrified, wondering how Tatsu had managed to get there. They realized the attack was a direct hit from electromagnetic cannons functioning normally. Randolph was shocked and said it was the worst-case scenario because the output had powered the electromagnetic cannon. Shells had descended rapidly, and they needed to restore the clouds quickly. People saw the warship approaching and were amazed by the vanishing ray machine, which had enabled them to sneak in successfully. A man in the control room told others to switch off the relay and shut down the broadcast. Tatsu appeared at the window, asking them to hold on, noting that these were the long-awaited, off-the-chart ratings. People noticed Tatsu standing on top of the broadcasting tower. From there, Tatsu attacked everyone, causing them to fall. Randolph was shocked, realizing that Tatsu was no ordinary human because of his incredible speed. He was killing people so fast that no one could see him, moving like a ghost. The anti-aircraft artillery was down, and Tatsu asked the woman piloting the warship to land it. Tatsu then reached the place where one of his friends, Mono, was being held captive. He asked Randolph if that was the correct location, and Randolph confirmed it was the core of the facility. Inside, Mono was deeply disappointed and feeling sorry for everyone. Tatsu arrived and told Mono that his fringe was as long as ever, apologizing for making him wait, but assuring him he had come to save him. Mono started crying, saying the timing was impeccable again and that he shouldn't even dream of such things. Tatsu replied that he was not a hallucination. Mono kept blaming himself, saying that even though Tatsu came to rescue him, it was a nice dream, but he deserved to stay there forever as punishment. Tatsu grabbed Mono's face and asked him to stop talking nonsense. He warned that if the attack had happened because of Mono, then Mono now had to decide what he wanted to do, whether to go out or not. Tatsu told him that the evil person forced this fate on him, but if Mono still chose to provide fuel to them, Tatsu would not forgive him and asked what his choice would be. Mono began crying again, saying he wanted to save people. Tatsu appreciated his answer. The army targeted him, and the warship from the Tatsu approached, informing that the lone boy was responsible for everything. Tatsu told those people to proceed, as he still had things to take care of. He had even placed Mono on that warship. The people were shocked to hear this, but Tatsu explained that the festival's lead actor could not leave halfway through. He then urged everyone to hurry and leave. The lady piloting the warship said it was not her concern, and they departed. Tatsu then remarked that it was time to leave the wing for the climax. The warship landed in a safe place where the other slaves were shocked to see that Tatsu had actually saved one of them from the army parade. They wondered where their leader had gone. A lady came down and explained that they had left him behind. The boy was shocked and asked what that meant. The lady admitted she had no idea either, but it seemed Tatsu still had something he wanted to do. They did not understand what Tatsu was planning or how powerful he really was, nor did they know if he intended to face everything on the surface by himself. Then a man stepped forward and said it was clear Tatsu wanted to be killed. He pointed out that Tatsu had suddenly appeared, declaring himself their leader, and had led them into a massive battle. The man urged everyone to leave, saying that even if the boy wasn't there, they could still escape on the ship. He refused to follow someone who seemed only eager to die. Mono shouted back, insisting that Tatsu was not that kind of person and was clearly up to something again. Meanwhile, Tatsu was driving a truck to strike the broadcasting tower wall, but the people discovered the entrance had been blocked. They realized they needed to defend the broadcasting tower since all of Edenia was watching them. People discovered that the military broadcast was being defended against multineers who were hijacking electromagnetic waves, and that the entire country's broadcast was controlled by the radio tower on the assembly ground. The slaves Tatsu had saved earlier wondered if he planned to take direct control of the tower. Because of the army's system, the broadcast could not be blocked. The news had spread worldwide, and the spectacle was still being aired. Tatsu was heading upstairs to the tower, stating that whenever the army did something, propaganda was mandatory. Whether on television or radio, every channel was the same, and even people living under a rock knew how the country's broadcast operated. For those treated like trash, it was the perfect time for their voices to be heard. Tatsu then challenged the leaders by declaring war and announcing that he was the supreme leader. He introduced Tatsu and the others as the Thunder Corps People's independent floating nation, Magonia. Both the slaves and the army were shocked to hear about this nation. A skirmish broke out, leaving the general shocked and questioning whether Tatsu was seriously calling it a country. The slaves asked Randolph what he was doing, questioning if he had just cleared the clouds. Randolph replied it was Tatsu's order to make the sky visible for his speech. Tatsu asked everyone who was oppressed among the Thunder Corps people if they were their brethren, declaring that all whose freedom and pride had been trampled were citizens of Magonia. He noted that many did not understand how warships operated throughout Edenia and were treated as fuel for the fire, their flesh consumed. But now, they would oppose this wickedness. Tatsu stated that he didn't care who was hiding or might be allies of the supernation. He longed for freedom and welcomed all. The slaves wondered what Tatsu was saying and laughed at it, calling it nonsense. One boy thought it was true, directed at everyone they had yet to locate. The general ordered to raise rebel surveillance levels in all sectors, deploy military police to shoot anyone still watching the broadcast, and abandon the broadcasting tower by bombing it so that nothing would survive. Tatsu simply urged them to raise their voices, promising that Magonia would surely appear. Randolph understood this as the signal and reversed the magnetic fields. Tatsu continued that if hope was what they desired, they should follow him, for they were the Thundercloud Nation. As the trajectory was confirmed, the tower was shot down. Tatsu called it the wake of red lightning and unleashed such tremendous power that it terrified the soldiers. Afterwards, Tatsu vanished from the scene. A cannon shell was successfully retrieved, and the electromagnetic cannon's capability amazed everyone. The slaves Tatsu had saved watched in awe, remarking that Tatsu could have been thrown off by now. They wondered if it had all been in vain but kept looking at the cannon, acknowledging Tatsu's incredible power to ride atop a cannon shell so effortlessly. Tatsu then appeared before the others behind and asked how the broadcast was going. Tatsu was very tired, so Mano was fanning him with a piece of paper to provide some fresh air. The lady mentioned that after the chaos caused by the radio broadcast, the army had destroyed cables and antennas shortly after Tatsu's speech began, and citizens watching the broadcast were immediately arrested. It seemed that all the news outlets had been taken over, and Tatsu's words likely didn't reach the masses. However, Tatsu said that his appearance and the name Magonia had largely been successfully broadcast and considered it a success. He believed enough people willing to rise up had been shown, and they would demonstrate who they really were and their motives by how they fought from now on. Declaring war was the proclamation of their nation's founding, as well as a call to recover their comrades. He said they would execute everything perfectly, marking the start of their invisible warship's journey to Magonia. The lady expressed that they would follow Tatsu wherever he went, and everyone else agreed, calling Tatsu their captain. Even the man who had been angry with Tatsu earlier now agreed to follow him. Dr. Randolph wondered what would become of himself, but others said Randolph was a prisoner of war and they would ensure he was treated humanely. Some asked Mano how he was connected to Tatsu, noting that he was not an ordinary Thunder Corps human. The lady told Tatsu she had just realized that if they wanted to attack Edenia, he should take down the enemy leaders first, as Tatsu was already strong enough. Tatsu denied this, explaining that although he once thought he was the strongest, the officers standing on the stage, especially their superior leader David Eltis, had him frozen. The lady wondered what that meant, but Tatsu admitted he didn't know either. Whatever it was, the fight ahead seemed harder than he expected, and he was eager for that battle. A truck carrying a load was moving along while two men were discussing Magonia. The driver wondered aloud if people had forgotten about the gag order and expressed concern that merely saying the forbidden word could result in being taken away to a concentration camp. The second man pointed out that since it was just the two of them there, rumors had already begun spreading throughout the town, and there was no way to stop people from talking. He explained that for ordinary citizens, the Thunder Corps humans were considered an urban legend, though the harsh truth was that their savior's arrival meant these beings would soon rise to prominence. The driver then remarked on the fog ahead, confessing that he didn't understand why it surrounded them and suggested it might be the work of a ghost. The second man criticized the driver for bringing up ghosts again, questioning how a ghost could appear in the middle of the day. Suddenly, a giant mechanical hand appeared and captured the truck, lifting it up. Both men were shocked as the hand placed the truck inside a warship hidden in the clouds. Tatsu expressed his appreciation for Libellula's actions and mentioned that he would appoint Libellula as the Minister of Armed Piloting in the future. Libellula gratefully accepted the praise. Tatsu asked Mano what he thought about the second bridge, explaining that it now served as the control room for their gigantic multi-purpose arm. He then requested Libellula to explain the equipment in the room to Mano, mentioning that while Tatsu was already familiar with it, Mano needed to be brought up to speed. Libellula agreed and told the two people who had been in the truck not to act strangely and to leave slowly. They emerged looking scared, and Tatsu realized that this area was the ship's cargo bay and that the truck they had just seized was currently being used by his men, specifically by a man with a buzz cut who were mugging people inside. Tatsu identified the man as Garnet, who seemed annoyed by Tatsu's orders but complied nonetheless. Tatsu informed Garnet that he was leaving the cargo identification and the interrogation of the captives in Garnet's hands. Afterward, Tatsu and Mano left together, and Mano expressed amazement, remarking that the ship was certainly one built for the Thunder Corps humans. Tatsu confirmed that it was Magonia. Later, they arrived at the kitchen, where Habakkuk was working. Tatsu suggested he turn on the lights. They then proceeded to the sickbay, where a boy named Seagull was taking care of the patients. Tatsu remarked that although it would be best if no one were actually hurt, sometimes such things were unavoidable. Finally, they reached the isolation cell, which doubled as a laboratory guarded by Panjan, where Dr. Randolph was working but feeling very sleepy. He asked to be allowed to rest, but Tatsu suggested he adjust the cloud ruler to stay awake. At last, they reached the ship's bridge, where the helmsman, a girl named Fall, was piloting the warship. Tatsu understood that Fall was the girl's nickname, which sounded like bad luck, so he suggested she change it. She replied that if Tatsu didn't like it, he could call her Hate instead. Tatsu simply greeted her by calling her Fall and told Mono that this would be their course from now on. When Tatsu asked if what Mono had told him the previous day was true, Mono confirmed it, reminding him that Alfred had escaped about a year after being captured and had managed to break free from the laboratory on his own. Mono added that Alfred could be the only person not under the control of the Edenia army. Tatsu remarked that if it really was Alfred, he would certainly be capable of doing something clever. Paul overheard this and mentioned that Alfred was one of Tatsu's friends from the cathedral orphanage. Tatsu agreed, saying Alfred was like a brother to him. He explained that their current objective was clear. First, they would search for Alfred and make sure to meet him. At that moment, Garnet arrived, saying that if more people of Tatsu's caliber appeared, he would have no complaints. Tatsu then asked how the work with the truck had gone. Garnet explained that the cargo was transporting food, so they now had enough rations to last for a while. He also described the foodstuff found in the truck. Paul remarked that she would love to have some wine. Tatsu excused himself, saying he wanted to try it too. Paul joked that Tatsu was probably underage, to which Tatsu replied that on Magonia, he was the one who made the rules. Garnet added that he had said everything he wanted to, and that news about them must have spread worldwide. However, they got information from the soldiers, and the outcome was simple. Without any official announcement, the soldiers kept silent, and the army completely ignored the rebellion that had occurred during the parade. Tatsu wondered if this was true, considering it the worst-case scenario. Mono asked what this meant, pointing out that with only one incident and their quick escape, the police had no one on their wanted list, effectively concealing their existence. Tatsu explained that this meant whatever methods they used, they didn't intend to leave any trace behind. The scene then shifted to a meeting of high-ranking soldiers who had never heard of someone like Tatsu, a kid who called himself that. They discussed the warship, which belonged to Lieutenant Colonel Shepard Skurver and was capable of wrapping its body in clouds using powerful static electricity for camouflage. They wondered why it had fallen into terrorist hands. Just then, a man entered, stating that when Blackburn gave the order to destroy the broadcast tower, he had forfeited his life. However, it turned out that he was still alive and standing there, which made the man feel happy and once again believe in the divine blessings of Goddess Edenia. Because of this, he said he now had the chance to receive his judgment. The man then used his power to burn the other man, believing that the plan had been devised to eliminate the perpetrators associated with him. The others agreed, and one of them mentioned that the invisible warship in question had been located and that preparations were already underway to take it down with a single strike. Meanwhile, aboard Tatsu's ship, he suddenly felt as if they were under attack. A man was seated at the location from which the attack was being launched, ordering to lower the angle of fire and shoot again. The woman piloting the ship cautioned that if they fired any lower, the mountains below would suffer the impact, putting the citizens living near those mountains in danger. The man dismissed her concerns, stating that the town was full of second-class citizens, and as the head of the high-standing Bristol family, he valued the life of Richard Frederick Bristol far above that of tens of thousands of commoners. Thus, they continued firing at Tatsu's warship. Tatsu asked Dr. Randolph what the weapon was. Others nearby speculated if it was an electromagnetic cannon, noting its incredible power. Randolph, clearly frightened, admitted that they were doomed and revealed that the weapon was the strongest battleship destroyer known as the Excalibur. Randolph explained that the airship was equipped with a high-powered electromagnetic mega-cannon with an extreme force limit. He said it fired bullets made of a special alloy, and no existing armor could withstand or surpass its range. It was comparable to a destroyer. Tatsu became angry at Randolph for placing such a massive gun on the ship, and even grabbed Randolph's neck from behind. Randolph responded by saying that the Cloud Ruler alone already consumed over half of the warship's resources, and even installing a small electromagnetic cannon had pushed the ship beyond its capacity. He admitted he was very scared because he felt it would be the end of them if the ship targeted them again. Then Garnet asked how those people had been able to follow the ship and whether it was not the Steel's vessel. Randolph explained that the ship was designed to house the Thunder Corps people and mate with the Steel, and it could also conceal the electromagnetic waves emitted from their bodies. Therefore, it should have the power to contain all the electromagnetic output within the cloud, but this was only if it was carrying Thunder Corps people with normal bodies. Paul mentioned that even if they were not detected immediately after boarding, those people began chasing them after the parade. Randolph stated that this was because Mono's emissions were so strong that the magnetic waves could not remain hidden for long. He added that if the Excalibur really arrived, it was certain that they had detected Mono's waves. Mono felt disappointed, thinking it was all his fault, just like 6 years ago. Saul, however, reassured everyone that despite the circumstances, Mono was already there and now they would win because of him. He urged everyone to listen carefully, explaining that the enemy could not see them perfectly. He pointed out that the second shot had missed by much more than the first one, which meant the enemy only roughly knew their location. That was why he had a plan. On the enemy battleship, Richard Frederick Bristol mentioned that he was drinking only Bristol wine, which was produced by his own family. He noted that the bottle he was currently drinking from had been sealed on the very day of consumption and possessed a particularly deep flavor. A lady reminded him that they were currently in the middle of a battlefield. Frederick remained calm, stating that the conflict would soon end and that the Skirveer was not equipped for air-to-air combat. Its limited speed meant they could not escape. He added that it was no longer a game, and it went without saying that they were exhausted. The lady spoke of civility, saying that it did not apply to the opponents they were fighting. Frederick wondered about her words and remarked that since their enemies were the Thunder Corps people, there was no need for anything like human dignity in battle. He believed they were merely resorts and anything they might consider an imitation of intelligent life who had ultimately rebelled against their just country. Therefore, they must be taught a lesson by being burned to ashes. Suddenly, the lady mentioned that a movement had been detected within the cloud. A single cumulonimbus had broken off, moving against the air current and separating from the main ship. Frederick commented that even the highest quality equipment, when handled by fools, ended up like that. He said the fools only prolonged their lives a little longer. He then stated that he had too many things to do to be bothered and ordered the electromagnetic cannon to be prepared for rapid fire. An attack had been launched against them, and Frederick remarked with disdain that the lowborn were always quick to dream, believing that someday their lives would change. He claimed their will could never compare to that of a noble, and suggested that it was their flawed ideals that had led to the uprising and spread the illusion of Magonia among the vulgar masses. Therefore, such delusions had to be erased, and he declared that slaves would never be able to escape from their control. The lady felt something was off and soon realized that the aircraft must have been hit somewhere, though the cloud was no longer surrounding the warship. She then suggested adjusting the cannon to maximum power and firing again to clear the entire cloud. When they carried out the attack, they discovered that the space was empty, with only a small fragment flying in the sky. From that piece, Randolph spotted them and announced that they had been discovered. Frederick was shocked and questioned where the Sprite had gone. It was at that moment they realized that the sovereign warship had launched a strike against them. The lady quickly understood that Tatsu and the others had used the cloud ruler as a decoy, and the main ship had been hidden in a different cloud all along. Frederick remarked that although the equipment should have been able to conceal the gunship's output, he could not understand how this had happened. Tatsu then told the others that it had all gone exactly as he had predicted, and that thanks to Mano, they had finally achieved victory. Meanwhile, the lady instructed everyone inside the Delixir to remain calm. She warned that the enemy was now backed by a support warship, which surpassed them both in power and durability. She insisted that Tatsu and the others wouldn't be able to defeat it, but suddenly a mirror shattered and Tatsu jumped in, wondering aloud what was happening. Libellula remarked that their efforts were truly futile because the enemy's canopies were extremely strong. Ball agreed, saying they were no match at that rate and suggested they withdraw for the time being. As she called out to Tatsu, they noticed that Tatsu had already jumped onto the enemy's warship, standing directly in front of Frederick. The women facing Tatsu thought he was a monster with immense combat power who had invaded their ship. Tatsu approached one of them, mentioning that she seemed familiar and indicating that he had likely found the commander. He asked her about the possibility of a ceasefire and whether she had witnessed the attack during the parade, implying that she probably understood their combat capabilities and that the outcome of the battle had long been decided. He added that Tatsu's side did not desire any more casualties on either side than necessary. Frederick questioned the idea of a ceasefire, suggesting that it might become problematic if Tatsu continued to speak as if everything was to his convenience, and insisted that such decisions would be made by the commander. Tatsu clarified that he was the one proposing the ceasefire. Frederick responded that it was impossible for him to entertain an argument with someone as stubborn and aggressive as Tatsu. Tatsu wondered about the cattle, and Frederick explained that the culling of Tatsu's cattle had been a cited matter long ago. Since Frederick was permitted to interact with humans, including handling the cattle, he told Tatsu that if he had any intelligence or shame, he should keep quiet. A lady warned Frederick to be careful, but he insisted that she should not misunderstand him. He did not harbor any resentment toward the Thunder Corps people. In fact, he respected them deeply. Frederick understood that normally it was impossible to have arbitrary control over electric currents in such an atmosphere. He took a wand in his hand and explained that things were different around the Thunder Corps people. Even without aiming, a large amount of electric current would gather and bundle around the body of a Thunder Corps person, acting as an electrode. He went on to say that the equipment was the same as that on the outer wall of the power plant housing the Thunder Corps people. Any trespassers trying to escape would be zapped by a torrent of electricity, which was neutralized by a special battery made using the Thunder Core people. Frederick mentioned that one syringe of this battery's power was equal to the strength of 10 people, and currently, they had 2. Then he said they would use it freely and unleashed his full power on Tatsu, challenging him to try to dodge it. The lady pleaded with Frederick to stop, but he had gone mad and ignored her. He declared that the Thunder Core people were resources to be exploited, and it was unthinkable for them to wish for freedom. The lady felt deeply sorry and noticed that Tatsu had absorbed all the electricity. With immense power, Tatsu struck back at Frederick, signaling that the negotiation had broken down. A bottle was found at Tatsu's feet, and he addressed the others, saying that to commemorate Magonia's first diplomatic negotiation, he would help himself to Frederick's sword and wine. He then asked if anyone had any objections and told them all to swim their best. Tatsu make them get scared as his warship was holding that stronger warship, otherwise it was going to fall. The people understood that the engine was malfunctioning and that they were losing altitude. Despite the ship crashing, everyone was trying their best to maintain control. Tatsu told them to leave the stronger warship behind, suggesting they could appreciate the view of Magonia from below. Tatsu and his people cheered, celebrating their victory over the strongest battleship destroyer. His people continued to cheer for Tatsu, and Mono hugged him. Tatsu replied that his whole body was hurting from the hug. Paul commented that Tatsu was as reckless as ever. Tatsu then gave her some wine, saying it was because she had asked for it. She asked if he wanted to try some as well, mentioning that the first sip had to go to the captain. Tatsu wondered if she was serious, and she agreed to let him drink it. However, when Tatsu took the first sip, he immediately spat it out, saying it tasted really bad. Randolph said that the wine was supposedly of superb quality. Tatsu wondered about the taste, noting that adults always seem to enjoy it, but he found it so bitter that it brought tears to his eyes. He could not detect any sweetness or grape flavor, though he understood it was wine. Meanwhile, the people who had fallen into the river wondered if they were safe. The lady there was concerned about Tatsu. On the other hand, Tatsu's body began shaking after drinking the wine for the first time, and it seemed as if he was fizzing out. As they continued traveling, Garnet offered grape juice to Tatsu, teasing him that it was something children usually drank. She assured him not to worry because it didn't contain a single drop of alcohol. Tatsu, however, was quite irritated and struck the wall, explaining that he had been carefully maintaining his rock-solid dignity and unifying the group's morale, but just having such a sweet drink touch his lips was unacceptable. Paul remarked that nothing bad had happened and that everyone was simply letting down their guard. She then wondered what they should do next, whether they were going to find Alfred and where he might be hiding. Garnet suggested that the most likely place was the underground city, a location even Edenia's troops couldn't fully monitor. She added that the chance of dying en route was higher than actually reaching the place. Tatsu disagreed, saying Alfred couldn't be underground, since he had been there for the past 6 years and couldn't be mistaken. The group then considered the Melbian Kingdom as their next destination. Currently, Edenia's control did not extend worldwide, and Melbian Kingdom was one of the few independent nations. Dr. Randolph explained that Edenia had always secretly used the superconduction thundercloud to keep airships away. Taking that into account, as well as the fact that the land held no strategic advantage for tactical occupation, if they wanted to avoid Edenia's radar without fleeing underground, their only choice was to head to the Melbian Kingdom. At that moment, MN came to take Randolph away, saying it was enough and that he should return to his cell because he still needed to work on developing new weapons. Randolph expressed his frustration, saying he hadn't had enough rest yet. Mono then asked Tatsu if he had decided on their course. Tatsu agreed and said their ship would set sail for the Melbian Kingdom. Garnet asked what kind of person Alfred was that he was so important to Tatsu. Tatsu replied that Alfred was like a big brother to him. He then recalled how 6 years ago, he and other kids had been living in an orphanage, and he was often late, so Alfred would escort him and call him a stickler because they had all been waiting for him. Tatsu asked them to get to the point and wondered how they had actually reached the floating island of Magonia. He then proposed they begin their strength meeting. All the other kids were excited to think of him as their captain. At that time, Durant arrived and asked if they hadn't exhausted the subject already, suggesting they could talk about something else, like the seasons, the weather, and many other things. They asked him to keep his voice down because they were having a serious discussion. Durant felt irritated and thought he shouldn't have brought it up. Tatsu then noticed someone and invited the person to join them. A boy wondered how they had found the place, while a girl suggested they wait for a clear day and use a telescope. At that moment, Alfred asked them to wait, explaining that the clouds were much higher than the mountains, so it would be dangerous to jump off into them. Tatsu said they should use the method that required the least effort. If they struggled too much trying to reach Magonia, they wouldn't have the strength left to enjoy it. Alfred pointed out that they didn't even know the exact location, so they should prepare themselves for a potentially long journey. They considered their options, but found all of them closed. Durant agreed, feeling they should forget about Magonia altogether. Then someone suggested they just look at what Durant had brought. Durant went to check a newspaper and overheard students talking about an airship mentioned in it, wondering if it could really fly. Everyone grew excited at the thought of possibly buying it. Alfred said that first, they needed to ensure a way to travel, and that Tatsu's plan was really crazy. But as the big brother, he would do his best to protect everyone. The scene returned to the present, where a strange boy, his head covered with a rope, was jumping across buildings. Some soldiers noticed him and felt that something was off. Upon closer inspection of his clothing, they realized it was unusual. Over the radio, the boy heard that the evacuation of the citizens was complete and that they had bought enough time. He was then ordered to eliminate the soldiers. The person hiding his face was revealed to be Alfred. When he removed his cover, the others were shocked and sensed an abnormal magnetism emanating from him. Alfred caused numerous guns to fly into the sky on their own and begin firing at the soldiers. The soldiers recognized their enemy as a Thunder Corps soldier and called for artillery support to destroy Alfred. Although the blast hit Alfred, he dodged it effortlessly, even as the soldiers celebrated thinking they had killed him. Alfred then started shooting at the cannons, easily destroying all of them while declaring that he would not allow Edenia to steal again. Paul explained to everyone about the Nelbian kingdom and its history, which dated back around 1,000 years. He mentioned that the kingdom had emerged due to its geographic location and strong naval forces, although many things had changed since then. However, the main problem they faced was the presence of superconducting thunderclouds in their path. Paul explained that these clouds caused terrible magnetic storms, and the electromagnetic coils within them were prone to short-circuiting. There was also a possibility that their ship might even crash. Since their fellow brother Alfred was somewhere in that nation, they were determined to cross the region of magnetic force no matter what it took. To do so, they planned to take their warship higher up into the sky. With the help of Mono's power, they believed they would be able to achieve this and safely pass over the destructive clouds. As they ascended into the sky, everyone felt scared due to the high speed. Tatsu, however, was excited and mentioned that the hypothesis cocktail thrill level was amazing, and he knew they would all be exhilarated. Fall said they needed more power to reach such a high altitude and asked Mono to unleash his power. She also suggested using the tenfold power sound. After Mono unleashed his power, the warship ascended into space, which thrilled the students greatly. Tatsu was a bit shocked by the sudden ascent. Meanwhile, Alfred arrived at the Nelbian kingdom, where people lined up to cheer for him. He mentioned that the praise was somewhat exaggerated, but people kept calling him Hero Alfred. They said that if the town connected to the continent by an umbilical cord had fallen, their country would have been quickly overrun by Edenia, but a lone soldier had saved them, and they deserved praise. Sir Gehrman approached Alfred, expressing his appreciation and saying that the queen was also very pleased. Alfred humbly replied that it was nothing special. Others around wondered why he looked so gloomy and suggested he should drink as much as he wanted, especially in Gehrman's presence. After a while, Gehrman told Alfred they should leave because the place would soon be filled with drunken people. During their conversation, Gehrman apologized for repeatedly sending Alfred to the battlefield. Alfred replied that it was his duty to protect the country. He recounted that it had been nearly 5 years since he first arrived, escaping the battlefield on his own 2 legs to appear at the country's border as a lone child. At that moment, he deserted his position as one of Edenia's Thunder Corps slaves, something Gehrman never expected, since no one had ever escaped the top-secret human experimentation facility. Alfred added that the country had heard about his suspicious circumstances and protected him, and he would never forget that kindness. Gehrman then revealed that the country would soon fall. Alfred was shocked and asked what he meant. Gehrman explained that Edenia had finally come to crush them. Although Alfred's resistance had prolonged their survival, he could not change the overall outcome, and the country was destined to fall soon. That was why Gehrman urged Alfred to go to Magonia, where his friends were. He believed Alfred should be with his irreplaceable friends, and that his battle experience would be valuable there. Alfred insisted it was his mission to risk his life fighting for the country. Gehrman replied that doing so would be nothing more than a double suicide. They could not allow the death of a foreign child who had been unwillingly drawn into the affairs of an old country to be eliminated by the tides of history. He mentioned that only their old bones would remain, and that those who tried to cling to the antiquated kingdom's imperial command and chivalry no longer believed they could protect the country through such a spirit. Everyone was willing to let him go, and Gehrman was also the one who wanted Alfred to live longer. Alfred, however, doubted how he could face them after all those years. For 5 years, he had been the sole survivor and had not even attempted to rescue his friends. Gehrman allowed this to happen and lied to Alfred, telling him that his friends had already been rescued and were in hiding. Everything remained this way until the day Magonia led an uprising. Alfred felt deep remorse and wondered if he should be sent again. Gehrman questioned how Alfred could be sent back. Then a man arrived to inform them that the front line had sent an urgent message. Enemy troops had received reinforcements during the battle, and several Thunder Corps soldiers had been confirmed present. The man explained that these soldiers specialized in hand-to-hand combat and were likely neutral types. Both men began to leave, and Gehrman remarked that those soldiers must be after Alfred, so he ordered the mobilization of a counter-squad to return fire. Alfred wished to join, but Gehrman refused, saying Alfred was not ready for such a match. Alfred expressed his willingness to die for the country, and despite being impudent, considered the general as a father figure. The people of the country had accepted him as family, so he did not want to abandon them. Having already failed his friends and everyone else, he vowed to fight for them and to die if necessary to protect the country, then rushed ahead. Gehrman warned him not to lie to his parents. A few enemy soldiers stood with their leader, who told them to leave everything to him, boasting that it had been years since he had encountered something so enticing and that he would dismantle it alone. This man was the leader of the Thunder Corps soldier unit of the Edenia army, known as the Crusaders. The citizens were searching anxiously because the enemy had arrived. They wondered if it was true that only 5 enemies had managed to break through the frontline defenses, but those 5 were like monsters. These monsters struck one of the trucks, blowing it up. The 5 enemies mocked the defenders, wondering where they thought they were going, and declared they would show them what a hero looked like when chopped to pieces. Afterward, they noticed another truck being dragged away. Finally, Alfred stepped forward to confront QF5. QF5 addressed Alfred, saying he must be the rumored magnetism type. Alfred asked to be called simply by his name. The other people worried that Alfred was blocking the enemy's advance. QF5 commented that it was impressive to stand alone on the battlefield and questioned whether civilians really believed the hero was so important. Alfred replied that it was indeed a good position. QF5 revealed that during the previous Great War, the spot where they stood had been the site of explosions at the burned lead mines, and no one knew how many bombs had detonated there. Suddenly, an explosion occurred, and a man wondered if Alfred had caused it. Herman denied this. QF5 then attacked Alfred from behind, claiming Alfred would not survive the shockwave alone. However, Alfred used his power to shoot them all with a gun. QF5 dodged the attack, insisting that no matter what Alfred did, he would not be able to harm him, even if he tried. Then QF5 struck Alfred, causing him to fall. The people were shocked by the scene, and one man remarked that, as he had thought, battling the neutral types was suicidal. He urged Alfred to run away from there. QF5 noticed that Alfred was still standing and wondered why he was so strong, eventually discovering that Alfred was wearing armor underneath. Alfred then used his power to launch an attack. Meanwhile, aboard Tatsu's warship, Libellula reported detecting a strong magnetic force coming from the surface. It was remarkable that such a force could travel all the way from the surface to their high altitude, especially since they relied on an electromagnetic-powered engine. Tatsu then swiftly descended toward the surface and, upon reaching it, ordered the hatch to be opened. On the ground, QF5 continued attacking Alfred, causing him to fall, and commented that if Alfred had stayed in the metal-rich area, he might have had a better chance. Now, however, QF5 was determined to kill him. Alfred's friend was shocked to see Alfred's magnetic field sword shaking, wondering what enormous magnetic power was at play. Suddenly, the warship emerged from the clouds, surprising everyone. It hovered midair. Then Tatsu jumped down, telling Alfred to sit back and watch. Alfred was surprised to see Tatsu. QF5 remarked that they were lucky to have found Tatsu as well, who was currently the most wanted target in the area. He instructed his men not to let Tatsu escape, and warned them not to underestimate Tatsu's plasma arrow abilities, which were also neutral type. In terms of specs, QF5 said Tatsu was equal to them, meaning they could not win against him in a one-on-one battle. As a result, they planned to use excessive power since their opponent had the advantage of fighting with the whole crew. Tatsu then saw QF1, QF2, QF3, and QF4 standing together and attacked them at once, wondering how they dared to harm his friend. Everyone was shocked that Tatsu had achieved such incredible speed that no one could react to it. They wondered who he really was. Tatsu explained that they were all Thunder Corps humans, and if they obediently surrendered and joined their country, he would be willing to overlook everything they had done so far. When one of them tried to attack Tatsu, he pushed him back, and the others launched a combined attack against him. Tatsu did not hesitate to fight all 4 alone, skillfully dodging their strikes and counterattacking with his power. They were amazed that he kept going, but they were determined not to let him continue like that. A girl remarked that Tatsu was annihilating the Crusaders. QF5 was shocked and wondered what was happening, believing that Tatsu's abilities should only be on par with theirs individually. He even called Tatsu a monster and decided to retreat. However, suddenly he felt something different. Alfred appeared beside him and explained that the blood of Thunder Core humans contained traces of magnetism, and each time Tatsu was attacked by QF5, the magnetism flowed into his blood. Alfred further revealed that Tatsu was now controlling the red blood cells in his body to restrict oxygen circulation. This was why he should not underestimate the soldiers of Nelbian. QF5, along with Bing, began to suffocate and fainted. Tatsu then mentioned that Alfred had also finished. They exchanged a glance, and Tatsu smiled before collapsing. Alfred seemed worried about him. Tatsu asked Mono to give him the chart, and Alfred understood that Tatsu was out of electric power. Garnet appeared concerned, while Mono commented that they would be powerless if Nelbian turned hostile toward them. A man asked General Gehrman for his orders. Gehrman instructed him to guide the airship to their parade ground for landing, to welcome the person on the ground, and to lead them inside the fortress. As Tatsu was brought inside, Mono went to recharge him, and Tatsu felt intense pain. They realized this was how Tatsu recharged his electric power. Alfred explained that by spending a huge amount of electricity, neutral types could manifest overwhelming physical abilities. However, facing opponents of the same type left Tatsu no choice but to use that power. Neutral types had limited capacity to generate electric power within their bones and needed constant recharging. Mono had been unable to recharge Tatsu in the past few days because Tatsu was defenseless during the process. Alfred understood that Tatsu had been pushing himself continuously. Others wondered if that person was Alfred, now serving as a soldier of Nelbion, and they thought he was cooler than their captain. Tatsu then stood up and remarked that he had just heard an improper comment about himself. Everyone was happy to see Tatsu all right. Mono said he could recharge Tatsu further, but Tatsu refused, fearing he might overload. Alfred explained that although neutral types could release momentary bursts of strong electric power, their electrical capacitance was very limited. Alfred continued by saying that despite everything, the Miri Thunder Core soldier was no match for Tatsu. Tatsu had gained the power of magnetism and now possessed abilities far more dazzling than those of the leaders. Alfred added that Tatsu was no longer his leader, as he was currently a soldier of Nelbion, and that this was to be their last meeting. Saying goodbye, Alfred left the place. At that moment, a girl appeared, wondering if this was the long-awaited reunion after 6 years. She thought it unfortunate that Alfred had ended their meeting with such coldness, as he was truly a stubborn person. Approaching Tatsu, she expressed how glad she was to see him recovered. She mentioned that from what she had heard from Alfred, she had at least understood the kind of person he was. However, she apologized that given the current state of affairs in their kingdom, they could not hold a grand reception for him. Idania was closely watching Tatsu's movements. She speculated that if Tatsu's bond with Alfred was not as strong as she had heard, she might one day see the proud expression on his face falter with deep emotion. She also remarked that 6 years was a long enough time to weaken even the strongest friendships. Tatsu rudely grabbed her face but thanked her all the same. However, he warned that he would not forgive her meddling in their affairs and promised to play with her another time, telling her to go back to work. Alfred was shocked by Tatsu's behavior and wondered what was wrong. After a while, Sir Gehrman arrived and told the girl that she should not be on the front lines. She replied that Edenia was like a country from the ancient warring states period, and they would not stop their attacks until the opposing nation's king was killed. She explained that to stop the war, which was reaching its conclusion, she had no choice but to offer her own head immediately. By doing so, she intended to stand within the kingdom's borders and show her citizens and soldiers the fulfillment of her final responsibilities as Queen Beatrix of Nelbion. It really makes Tatsu and his people get shocked as she was the queen. The Queen Beatrix was traveling with Tatsu Gehrman and Alfred. Tatsu learned that when the king had passed away 2 years earlier, Beatrix was only 9 years old and had not been appointed regent. Instead, she shared the responsibility of managing the kingdom's politics with several ministers and generals, eventually assuming the throne. She was indeed the youngest head of state to have ruled their kingdom. Tatsu hesitated because of his earlier actions, but Beatrix found the situation quite amusing. They wondered what had happened to Tatsu's courage when he spoke sharply to Atlas. Beatrix told Tatsu that he need not be so stiff, even though she was the queen of a kingdom on the brink of ruin. A millennial-old kingdom with no means to resist the next invasion and simply waiting for its downfall. Alfred was reluctant to bring up such matters, but Beatrix revealed that she also despised the temporary peace of mind. She explained that Edenia was a nation that eradicated the citizens of its enemies without hesitation, so they would have to accept defeat and offer the queen's head. Her father had long refused to do so because of his great pride. Now, Only elderly women and children remained. Beatrix wished to show them the picturesque scenery their kingdom boasted. Even if Edenia took her life, the battle would not cease, so necessary supplies must be provided. Finally, Beatrix asked Tatsu to leave the country by the next day, to which Tatsu replied that they could leave immediately after retrieving Alfred.